Welcome to the Real Estate Syndication Show. Whether you are a seasoned investor or building a new real estate business, this is the show for you. Whitney Sewell talks to top experts in the business. Our goal is to help you master real estate syndication. And now your host, Whitney Sewell.
Are you a new or experienced investor wanting to learn how to have a successful syndication business? Learn from the nation's leading syndication expert, my friend, Whitney Sewell Chopra. He has created a multifamily academy where you will learn everything about deal analyzing to selecting emerging markets, managing assets, and much more. In the academy, you'll find over 500 lectures and templates to help you run a successful syndication business. Your membership also gives you access to Vinny every Wednesday through masterminding and coaching calls. Vinny came to the U.S. with only $7 and now is a CEO of 5 companies, acquiring and managing a portfolio of more than 3,500 units. He's completed 26 successful syndications ranging from 50 to 500 units and created a portfolio valued over $200 million in commercial real estate. He built the academy to teach and mentor investors like you to succeed. To learn more about the Multifamily Academy, text LEARN, L-E-A-R-N, to 474747 or call his team at 925-766-3518. This is your daily real estate syndication show. I'm your host, Whitney Sewell. Today our guest is Jeff Lerman. Thanks for being on the show, Jeff.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Now, Jeff has established a nationwide reputation as the real estate investor's lawyer. He helps investors nationwide with their transactions. Clients tell him that what sets him apart from other real estate lawyers is that Jeff is also an investor, and he uses his investing experience to provide more practical, creative, and effective solutions. And so, I want to give a little story here, but last night I was at a meetup and I was speaking just about syndication. A lot of people have never heard about syndication, what that is, but also people were talking, different investors that were there were saying JV this, and using those acronyms, right? Just those letters. And other people finally spoke up and said, what is JV? What does that mean? What is that? And so, and a lot of us talk about these things and we just assume people understand. But Jeff is spending time with us today discussing joint ventures, which is JV, joint ventures. And he says the cheapest, easiest, fastest, and safest alternative to syndication. And so I'm really looking forward to this discussion, Jeff, and just really getting your expertise on this topic. And so why don't you give the listeners a little bit about who you are and your practice and what you all do, and then let's dive into why this topic is so important for investors to know.
Sure. Okay. Your story right there is very appropriate because you're right. I speak in front of investors all around the country. And I actually, I have taught the private money boot camp for one of the largest commercial real estate education companies in the country. And that actually was the genesis of why I started to speak on this particular topic. Because what I discovered is that I would spend some time talking about syndication. It's a weekend boot camp. And I would spend a couple hours explaining everything there is to know about syndication. And as you know, there are a lot of details that certainly are not intuitive about how to make sure you're complying with the securities laws if you're going to syndicate. And one of those happens to be that you have a pre-existing relationship with whoever it is you're going to make a pitch to. And invariably, what would happen after I teach them this particular aspect of security compliance, I get somebody coming up to me after at the break with a very concerned look on their face. And they say, you know what, that's great, but I have a deal now. And if you're telling me that I can't talk to a potential investor about the deal unless I already knew the investor, have some sort of, quote, pre-existing substantive relationship, which itself is an assembly of terms, each of which has their own special meaning, then I got a problem. I got a deal now. I need money now. What do I do now? And in that moment, they realize that syndication isn't going to help them. And what I tell them is what I'm about to explain to you and your listeners, the alternative of a joint venture. And so I'm really glad that you saw that firsthand, because the people that you and I communicate with don't know. They very often, they don't know all the terminology about syndication for sure. And they throw around the terms joint venture, partnership, syndication interchangeably, and they're definitely not. What we do at our firm, Lerman Law Partners, is we focus, we many years ago when we started, we brand ourselves as the real estate investor's lawyer, because as you said in the intro, I am an investor. I'm an unusual lawyer in that I'm the real estate investor's lawyer, but I'm also a real estate investor. I'm part of a family office. Our family office, I'm the middle generation. There's a generation ahead of me, generation coming up behind me. And we have been doing deals for decades. We've developed thousands of units of apartments, hundreds of thousands of square feet of office, medical office, restaurant, retail, hospitality. And most of the deals that we have done have been joint ventures. And so it's a topic which is near and dear to my heart. And I walk the talk on this. I'm telling your listeners how to do what I've already been doing for most of my career in real estate. And so we focus on helping investors nationwide with their transactions. Everything in the cycle of ownership, from entity formation to asset protection, joint venture, syndication, purchase and sale agreements, commercial loans, construction agreements, commercial leases, virtually all of an investor is going to encounter in this business. And if you're in California, we also can help you with your litigation matters. So that's who we are. That's what we do. We represent whoever's listening, whatever city, whatever state you're in the United States. We can help you. We have clients all around the country. So that's a little bit of background, not only about who I am, but the genesis of this talk, which is a really important aspect of it.
Yeah, that's awesome. I appreciate you elaborating on your all's practice and who you are, and so the listeners have a good understanding. But before we really get into what you mean exactly when you say joint venture, but why is this so important for us to know, or as investors, or why do we need to know about this thing called joint venture?
Well, you kind of touched on it in your opening remarks, but the main things that syndication is great. I do syndication. I've done syndication for my deals. I do syndication in a single deal. I often do a syndication and a joint venture in that one deal. And I can explain when and how those make sense, but that's something that's important to understand. And the challenges with syndication, aside from what we just discussed, which is that in many situations, the investor doesn't have the time to do a syndication because they don't have enough pre-existing substantive relationships. And so that's one reason why this is important, because they may not have another option. But even if they do have the option, they do have pre-existing substantive relationships. Syndication is significantly more expensive from a legal standpoint than joint ventures. Joint ventures, I can set up a joint venture for a fraction of the legal fees that they will have to pay me if I do a syndication. And so that's when I say cheapest, easiest, fastest, safest, there's a reason for each of those words. One of them is that's cheaper. Second, syndication is too complicated. It's complicated for a variety of reasons, not the least of which is that, again, it's not intuitive. As a matter of fact, in many situations, it's counterintuitive. Go back to my Genesis story, the one where most investors think that the proper sequence of events in doing this business is find the deal, then start looking for your investors. But as you know, in syndication, you have to have, ideally, your prospective investors lined up before you find the deal, not only for the reasons for securities compliance, but also because if you start looking for the money after you find the deal, it's going to be more difficult to make sure you get all the money that you need to do the deal within the time frame that you're going to be able to negotiate to do it. So it's got that going for it. And depending on how much money you need for your deal, if let's just say for every $1 million you're trying to raise, on the average, how many investors is going to take? I don't know, maybe 10. If everybody's putting in a minimum of $100,000, if you're going to accept investors with lower minimums, then it's going to take even more. So it can be risky if you're trying to, depending on how much money you're trying to raise all that money from a number of smaller investors. It takes too long to do a syndication. Typically, we've done a syndication in as short as 3 days. We did it that fast because the client had a need, and we both worked long hours to make it happen. And it was a sophisticated client who was able to answer my questions and give me what I needed fast enough. But in my experience, and I'm not sure how this jives with yours, but the biggest challenge for me in putting together syndication is not what I have to do. It's what I'm waiting for from my client. They have to give me the business portion of the private placement memorandum that I have to put in there, and then I have to reconcile everything and prepare all the other aspects of the PPM to accurately reflect the business terms and whatnot. So in my experience, it usually takes about 30 days to put together the entire PPM. Is that consistent at all with what your experience
Yes, I would say so. I would never imagine getting it back in 3 days. Yeah. Not even close.
No. I would never, don't want anybody to take that away from here and say, okay, 3 days is all it takes.
You're going to be the top syndication attorney now.
Yeah, unless you're going to, you should, anybody listening to this, if you're going to be doing a syndication, you should assume it's going to take that long and plan accordingly when you are negotiating your purchase and sale agreement, which is another thing. A lot of times people use a syndication lawyer and a separate real estate lawyer for negotiating the purchase and sale agreement. We do both. So we automatically, if they and actually what we tell our clients is, you should be coming to us when you do your letter of intent, not when you need the purchase and sale agreement, because
right.
The deal starts to really take form with the letter of intent. But you need to really coordinate the timing on all that. So so those are the main reasons why this is something that the investors really need to understand. Yeah. And I tell you, whenever people come to me and ask me to do a syndication, I say, I'm happy to do a syndication, but I think your plan A should be to do a joint venture.
So, ultimately, joint venture is another type of partnership, right? It's not a syndication, but it's really a partnership, correct?
Yes, but again, syndication is a partnership as well.
Yes.
In a
yes.
sense.
That just means it's another type of partnership.
It is. And so that's why, it's always a little.
So maybe you can elaborate on some of those differences between, JV or joint venture and syndication, any other differences that we need to be aware of?
Okay, let's talk about just from a documentation standpoint. If you and I decide we're going to do a deal, all we need, and let's assume that we're going to do what the majority of joint ventures do, which is use an LLC to be the ownership entity and also the document which details the terms and conditions of our relationship as joint venture partners. So that's one document, an LLC agreement. And an LLC agreement is not terribly complicated. It isn't. It's not nearly as complicated as the documents for a PPM and everything that goes with the PPM. So contrast it. We got one LLC operating agreement if we're joint venture partners, and that LLC operating agreement is going to be somewhere between 30 and 40 pages, give or take, depending on how complicated you're going to make it. With a PPM, we've had PPMs that not include, it depends how how long your business portion of the PPM is going to be that you give to me, but it's difficult to get a PPM done under 50 pages. You've got your PPM, your disclosures, your risk factors, you got your investor questionnaire, your subscription agreement, you've got the business portion of it. And so there are just a lot more moving parts in there. Plus, there is the time that you as the investor need to spend asking me questions to make sure you know what to do, and me telling you, you're not even going to ask me as an investor all the questions you need to ask. You truly don't know what you don't know. And so I need to explain to you the do's and don'ts and what you can and can't do, because, and I'm sure you've seen this as well, I go to investor conferences all the time as a speaker, and I'm also networking. And I guarantee you, there are investors at every single one of those conferences violating securities laws and tainting their offering every single time, every single day, just because you don't know. So that is probably the single most important distinction between a joint venture and a syndication. Go back to the cheapest, easiest, fastest, and safest. Because if you do a joint venture and you do it the right way, then you don't have to worry about the securities laws. The securities laws don't apply. And so it's from that standpoint, it's the safest, because again, as you know, if you do screw it up, the potential consequences and the potential economic damages that you're exposing yourself to if you violate securities laws, including potential criminal sanctions, can be severe. So, those are the main reasons why joint ventures are important for people to know as an alternative to doing deals with other people's money.
Yeah. So, it is definitely something we need to be familiar with, especially in the syndication business. I feel like we get pretty tunnel focus or tunnel vision, right? I mean, the syndication, but it may not always have to be a syndication. But tell me, in your opinion, when would you do a syndication over a joint venture?
For me, I would never do a syndication instead of a joint venture unless I wouldn't do that joint venture anyway. I was going to say, unless there's a partner that I have any concern about having to deal one-on-one with. But if I did, I wouldn't be a partner with them anyway. I mean, one of the things that we do when we set up joint ventures is we spend a lot of time helping our clients make sure that there's a good fit in that business marriage before they even get started. So yeah, for me, and given the relationships that we have, I would always prefer to do a joint venture instead of a syndication. The only time I would do a syndication in addition to a joint venture in the same deal is if I want to bring friends, family, and clients with me into a deal. Let's say you had a deal and we're talking about doing a joint venture, you and I. And I want to bring friends, family, and clients into the deal with me, which I do. I would do a syndication. I would create you and I would have one LLC, and then separately, I would form your joint venture with me would be not with me individually, but with my LLC, and my LLC would be a syndication with my friends, family, and clients. And so I would still observe all of the rules that you have to do in syndication and that on my side of the deal, but that wouldn't concern you. So, and that's something that is a potential structure that some of your investors might want to consider doing when you find yourself in that situation. But no, I mean, I walk the talk. We have most of the deals we've done have been joint ventures, just for the reasons I've been describing to you.
Yeah. No, I wanted to ask you.
There's
Go ahead.
there are a couple other huge advantages to a joint venture that are important to understand. First, there's in our business, you know, that there's always this element of risk, and you don't know, and you have your own gut level, risk tolerance level. It's a whole different dynamic if I'm doing a deal with you, an experienced investor, an experienced syndicator, and a passive investor. I would never ask a passive investor, hey, I'd like you to invest $100,000. What do you think of my deal? I would never ask them that. I mean, I would say, here's the deal, and here's why I think it's a good opportunity. So one of the main benefits of working with somebody who, and actually I'm going to interrupt myself here because we haven't yet really defined the difference between a joint venture and a syndication. And I think it's important for the point I'm about to make. So the difference between a joint venture and a syndication is simple. A joint venture is with another individual who's going to be actively engaged in the deal. And that what that means, what that looks like in any particular deal is going to depend on the deal. But let me give you an example of a deal I did to give you some better idea. So some people think if you do more than two people, you can't have a joint venture, and that's not true. I did a joint venture. There were four of us. It was a residential subdivision development deal. And in the deal, there was the guy who found the deal and who was getting the loan. There was the developer. There was a broker who was involved in the design, marketing, and sale of the residential properties after it was completed. And there was myself. I was the one who brought the money to the deal. So there were four of us in this joint venture. We were all sophisticated, all understood the real estate aspects of the deal. And we got together. We were actually in different cities. And we got together on the phone every week for a standard meeting. We had one of the people was the secretary, took notes. We discussed everything. We had, and in the minutes of those meetings, it said who said what were the thoughts, and everybody's contribution was literally documented right there, black and white. That's a joint venture. And because we were all actively engaged, and none of us were relying on the efforts of somebody else to make a profit for them. Those are the two things. You got to be actively engaged and sophisticated enough so that you are not relying upon the efforts of somebody else to make your profit, which is it goes back to the securities case, the Howey case, the famous case as far as a definition of what a security is. So that's the difference between a joint venture and a syndication. A syndication is anytime somebody is giving you money and expecting you to make a profit for them, return on their investment, that's a security. Okay? We're on the same page.
No, that's great. I appreciate you elaborating on that because I know a lot of people are wondering what the difference is. So that's great. It's another myth here. I think that you can dispel here that I'm sure a lot of people are thinking. They're thinking, oh, wait a minute, Jeff. We're doing larger apartment complexes. We're not doing that duplex. And so, I want you to be able to elaborate just on the size of deal and, can we do a joint venture on large commercial projects as well? Because I know that's a question a lot of people have.
I can tell you, we did our family developed and still owns the Four Seasons Hotel in Los Angeles. That's a joint venture. We developed a 712 unit apartment project. We did that in a joint venture. We did a 261 unit condominium project in a joint venture. So the answer to the question is there is, you could do, it doesn't make a difference. The size of the deal doesn't matter, especially, it's different today than it was when I got started. There are so many family offices out there and so many family office conferences and other ways that you can reach out to family offices, that if you don't have people that right now who have the wherewithal to be a potential joint venture partner, if you have a bigger deal, if you're willing to go out there and do what you need to do to network and find those people through all the different ways you can network, then they're out there. It's just a matter of how bad you want it, how bad you're willing to find it. But the other thing, going back to the question I was answering when I interrupted myself, to have somebody who you can say, I like this deal, what do you think? And have their answer be not just giving you sort of a off the top of their head answer, but giving you an answer and being willing to put their money where their mouth is and say, yeah, I like that deal and I'm willing to put in $1 million, $2 million, $3 million, $10 million. That has so much more power in not only giving, affirming, because no matter what the deal, most deals, there's going to be that element of risk, and you might be, saying, is it really good? And is it as good as I think it is? And it's great to have that feedback from somebody who's willing to put their money where their mouth is. The related point, which is huge for anybody who's trying to build their portfolio, and if they're listening to this podcast, that's you. When I bring you into a deal, I am opening up, or I am cultivating, I may already have it, a relationship for future deal flow. And in this business, deal flow is where it's at, right? And so to be able to have somebody that we have three partners that we've done multiple deals with. We bring the deal sometime, they bring the deal sometime. And if we didn't have that relationship, a lot of those deals wouldn't have gotten done. So that is, it's, to use an overused cliche, that is priceless. To have the right partner, that's huge. So those are things you're not going to get from a syndication, because you're not going to get that feedback, at least not as good feedback from an investor. They'll either invest or they won't. And if they do invest, all it means is that they believe whatever you told them, not that they really did a detailed analysis on the deal, right? Yeah. And it's unlikely that they're ever going to be in a position to give you a deal that you want, because they're a passive investor in your deal. So those are pretty huge advantages to a joint venture.
Yeah. So even the number of people that are going to be in this joint venture, is that something we should be thinking about? Because they all need to be active, I believe is what you said. And so, maybe you can clarify that. Or, is there a limit to the number of people that could be in that joint venture?
It's a limit. The limit is always going to be, it's always going to be a question of fact. Mm-hmm. If it ever comes under scrutiny, what's going to be looked at is not only what they said they were going to do, but what they actually did. And so I'm going to answer the question that always gets asked when I talk on this topic in front of a group. And they say, well, okay, so what if we just put in the operating agreement that he's going to do X, Y, and Z? Is that it? I said, no, it's not it, because remember the story. I told you that there were 4 of us and we had a documented proof of what we actually did. If it was that easy to circumvent the securities laws, that all you had to do was create in your an operating agreement that said what you were going to do, but then you didn't do it, then the SEC would never let that happen. So, and the next question is, well, how would the SEC know? The SEC will know not if the deal's going great. It's when the deal goes south and your partner goes and talks to their lawyer and says, well, tell me what my remedies are. And the lawyer says, as I would do, tell me more about everything that happened. And as soon as I found out that ultimately what you did, my potential client, is just give the money, I'd say, okay, well, then it sounds like this was a security and you guys didn't comply. And that's our best claim, is to go after securities fraud. So, it is important that on every deal, we need to understand exactly what's being done. In a development deal, it's the more there is to do, the easier it is to have more joint venture partners involved, because it's easier to justify active engagement. That's one end of the spectrum. The other end of the spectrum is, let's say you do a land bank, right? All you do is buy a piece of dirt, and that's it. And so on something like that, it does get more difficult to respond if the trier of fact, whether it's a judge or the SEC or a jury, to the challenge that, well, really, didn't all they do is give you the money? In a land bank deal, that may be all they did. So the more there is to do, the more you can document the actual involvement, the better position you're going to be in to defend yourself if it ever comes under scrutiny.
Documentation. It doesn't matter if we're doing syndication or if we're doing joint venture or numerous other things. That documentation is so important. I'm glad you brought that up. Unfortunately, we're out of time, and we're going to have to move to just a couple more questions. But it's been great to just elaborate on joint venture and really opening our minds to that possibility, and thinking about the difference in joint venture and syndication, and what we need to know there to make sure we're doing it correctly. But Jeff, what is one thing that's contributed to your success?
Well, again, I'm going to invoke a cliche: persistence. If there's any business where persistence really pays, it's this one, right? I mean, there's so much that you have to do in order to sift through the haystack to find that needle. And once you find it, there are so many ways that the deal can throw curveballs at you that you have to be able to deal with. I'll never forget, when I first got in the business, I was working with my brother-in-law, and he said he got the loan approved on this development deal. I said, "Oh, great, you got the deal, you got the loan, that's great." He says, "Yeah, it's great. Now all we have to do is build it." Shouldn't be a problem. And so yeah, I do think persistence is the number one thing, I think, in any kind of business, but it's never more true than in real estate.
For sure. And how do you like to give back?
Like this, going back to how we started this talk, the only reason we're talking is because what I was in a unique position to observe, teaching this topic of syndication and private money over and over again, year in and year out, and seeing the look and the reaction on the faces of investors, like the people who are listening to this podcast, when they were freaking out that they had just a few days left to raise the money they needed. They had come to this event in the hopes of finding that money, and then to hear me explain why, if they do that, then they have a choice to make. Do you want to do the deal and violate the securities laws, or do you want to just pass on the deal? That's, as an investor myself, my heart goes out to them. I empathize. And I don't know about you, but I've been in that position where I have money that's already gone hard, and we still have a few bucks we have to still gather to close a deal. That, those are some sleepless nights there, right? So what I realized is I have to go out there and discuss this, because investors don't know, and they shouldn't have to wait to get into spend thousands of dollars to go to a weekend boot camp to find out they got a problem. They should be able to get this information for free through good podcasts like yours.
Awesome. Jeff, we're grateful that you're so generous with your time and knowledge and your experience too, and sharing with us. I know I've learned a lot, and I know the listeners have as well, and we're grateful. But tell them how they can get in touch with you and learn more about your practice.
Yep. Okay. So it's really easy. Our website is who they are. It's the URL is realestateinvestorlaw.com. So it's real estate investor, and just add law at the end, realestateinvestorlaw.com. That's how you get to us. Come to our website. There's lots of free resources. There's lots of free information. There are some great testimonials from people just like your listeners who they can hear what we've done for others, and please reach out to us no matter where you live, and we can help you with your transactions, and we look forward to talking to you.
Thank you for listening to the Real Estate Syndication Show, brought to you by Life Bridge Capital. Life Bridge Capital works with investors nationwide to invest in real estate, while also donating 50% of its profits to assist parents who are committing to adoption. Life Bridge Capital, making a difference, one investor and one child at a time. Connect online at www.lifebridgecapital.com for free material and videos to further your success.